Hey, good morning. Why don't you join with us as we sing some songs together this morning? Your favor waits within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow? For good, we believe and we trust in you, whether we see it now, whether we know the details or not. We trust that you are a good God. Come on, I just encourage you again this morning to sing along. We can't hear you. Probably few people can, but God loves to hear your voice, and I really believe that our spirits need to hear us sing these words. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of fate are never enough. Then you came along and you pulled me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you sing them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. We worship you. We worship you. Our God. We love you. Turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Yes, you are. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. One more time. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, there's no all our praise we give you. All our praise we give you. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Oh. you, worship you. You are here, moving in our worship you. You are here. Let's go to the chorus. Miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are way maker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Touching every heart, I worship you, I worship you. You healing every heart, I worship you, I worship you. You heal, turning lives around, I worship you, I worship you. You are mending every heart, I worship you, I worship you. You are way maker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are way maker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Way maker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 Yes, you are. Making ways. Making ways. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keep, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. 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 Yeah.
Well, welcome to church again. I hope you enjoyed that time of worship. Thank you, worship team, for leading us in worship. My name is Josiah, and I get the privilege of being one of the pastors here at this church. And we are in the middle of a series. We started it last week. We launched our series called Current Affairs, which apparently has something to do with CBC, but I don't know. And we are talking about different things, and I'm joined here with Pastor Dave, and we're going to pick Pastor Dave's brain over these next I guess, 4 more weeks about some things that are current in our life, current in the world, that we want to hear what a proper or what response we could have or should have in this time. Last week we talked about cancel culture.
Yeah.
Something prevalent in society and in the world today and right now. And today we're digging in and we're talking about something called purity culture.
Purity culture.
Purity culture in the church. So let me preface this, as I'm sure would be the case with cancel culture and maybe a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in these next, 4 more weeks. For some of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then the 80% of you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, they know, just don't know the terminology.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's like last week you used ghosted.
Yeah.
and I'm sure that fell flat some places. Anyway, so purity culture. I want to talk about purity culture. And I think this will be an interesting conversation for those of you who don't know. Pastor Dave is my dad.
It's going to be interesting.
And really, purity culture really revolves around sex. And I don't think we actually have ever had a conversation about sex.
I don't remember.
Me neither. Yeah. So this could be uncomfortable. Nonetheless, we're talking about purity culture. And purity culture was birthed, if you will, in the 90s, which is when I was. That wasn't a pun intended. People think I was
when you were birthed. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be funny, but it was birthed in the 1990s, and it came from evangelical Christianity,
Totally, yeah.
Based on the idea of ultimately the initial premise was abstinence to marriage, so abstaining from sex until you got married. So going along with purity culture, whether it be churches or parents, those who were in Christianity at that time or part of purity culture would have discouraged dating. That was often a part of it, discouraging dating, because dating was only something you did to pursue or find someone as a spouse. So there was a famous book that was written called I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Sure,
and that was on the premise of believing that you courted instead. So you pursued a marriage partner. So promoting virginity before marriage. There were things like the purity pledges, which was sort of like signing an agreement that you would not have sex before marriage.
Yeah. Rings.
Rings, purity rings, purity balls. Like dances, purity dances, purity dances. All right, guys, calm down here. Purity dances. So
my parents might be watching this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I didn't say anything. I was talking about dances.
Everybody else was laughing.
Yeah, they were like father-daughter dances where you would make commitments to each other. That fathers would protect their daughter's purity, daughters would abstain from sex until marriage. So this is something that's come under a lot of scrutiny in the last couple of years. I would assume, and maybe this is wrong to assume, but I would assume it was all rooted in very innocent and positive portrayal. Like the idea was positive. The hope was positive, but there's been a lot of backlash on what purity culture's
Especially
repercussions
recently.
were.
Recently.
Yeah, in the last 2 years, I think, and I think even more so, where we are right now. But purity culture, I think for those who didn't grow up in church or those who weren't around, maybe it sounds like a really obscure thing, but it was popular in the day. Purity rings were worn by people like Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, the Jonas Brothers, right? Because it was just a part of the culture at that time.
Church culture.
Church culture.
And then in America or U.S., because church is such a huge part of the culture, more so than here in Canada.
Definitely. And there's been some negative press around purity culture. I think when I presented this topic to you, you had to figure out what I was talking about initially.
Well, just again, because I hadn't heard the term.
Yep. But you were a part of purity culture.
Oh, yeah, I certainly would have been, yeah. Hey, just before we jump into purity culture, I know we're going to do that, but last week we were talking about cancel culture.
Sure.
There were just a couple questions that came up in the chat that we didn't catch, and I wonder, can I just take a minute?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just
guess so.
Two quick things. Well, one was...
What am I going to do now?
Yeah, what are you going to do now? Well, one of the questions was really about boundaries in cancel culture.
Sure.
And, how do you define it too? And I just wanted to really... Because I think those are important questions.
Great.
And I think a lot of times at church, this is my own pet peeve, we answer questions that people aren't asking.
Okay.
So I want to make sure we answer the questions that people are asking. Is that... in terms of boundaries and cancel culture, boundaries is actually intended to preserve a relationship, where cancel destroys a relationship. So boundaries is putting things in place that with the intent of preserving it. If you're putting boundaries in place with the intent of squeezing somebody out, that's already cancel culture. That's not boundaries, it's something else. So that was just, and there's a great book on that by Dr. Henry Cloud on boundaries, which is a fabulous book on that.
Yeah.
The second question that we had come out was just in terms of, it said Jesus paused. There's a moment of pause before Jesus responded. And the question came up in the culture we live in, a lot of people are going, if you don't say something about an issue, you get canceled because obviously you're not against it or ever like that. We still have to be a voice, but it's about let's pause before we do the extreme things like cancel. We need to stop and think and consider before we do. So I think there's got to be a space where we can still dialogue and have conversation. But that is part of the pause. Anyway, just on that and back to purity culture. You're right. I was part of it.
Yeah. All right. No, good.
I mean, that was, as we were raising, our kids and, and being in church and pastoring at that time, there was definitely a lot of emphasis on, staying pure till marriage and how can we support that and how can, so chastity rings we'd done and just encouraging that, at least one of our kids, very much the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye followed through on that, and it was part. And I guess to say it was innocent, I don't think it would even be as far as saying it was innocent. I think there's two things actually that need to be noted about it. Is that I think what we saw in purity culture was we saw an attempt by parents and church to get the next generation to be better than they had been. If we can set it, I've been listening a lot to Craig Rochelle lately, and Craig Rochelle has just been talking a bit about shame. And I think if we went back and were honest, I think you'd find a lot of people, a lot of my generation, a lot of parents that they're carrying a lot of shame from their sexual activity prior, or all that, and so there's a lot of shame in there, and so it's a shame-driven thing. Like, we don't want you in that same kind of thing, and so I think you can trace a lot of that to that kind of thing there, and there is also certainly a biblical basis for preserving sexual activity within the confines of marriage. It's a protection thing, and it's it's definitely the case, and so some of that just carried around from there.
I think when I say innocent, I mean that that it was well intended. So if there's negative repercussions to it, that was not the intention of the negative repercussions.
Right.
And I think I think something that happens now, we just talked about cancel culture, is that so now we've got negative repercussions of purity culture, right? So things such as
swing it away.
Well, yeah. So things such as so the belief or the idea was, if I abstain from sex until marriage, then I will have an amazing sex life, right? Or that would be the belief that some people had.
Sure, absolutely.
But sex was never talked about, right? Or if I don't abstain from sex, then I'm dirty, shameful, wrong, unworthy, and should cancel myself in some ways.
And it's that whole shame thing, right? It's just and I think part of that whole purity culture promoted and promised things that the Bible didn't promise.
Right.
I mean, if you're promising, I've been married for 40 years, and sex is a great part of marriage, and there's that uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
And but to assume that everything is always going to be great, I waited, so then I'm a complete novice, so therefore everything's going to be wonderful.
Right.
Yeah, there's sides of that, the relationship, the solo, how do I put it? Not the
monogamy.
The monogamy, to one person, everything to that one person, you learn together. All of that isn't really important, and that's there. But there's this, the argument in purity culture, as you brought up, is this idea that if I wait till I'm married, sex will be wonderful. It may not.
Right.
And you might wait till you're married, and it would be terrible.
Right.
All of that stuff. And again, I just think that's something that the Bible doesn't promise. You know, and you touched on that other side, which I think is actually even bigger because, you know, you mentioned Josh Harris,
Right.
who wrote the book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And Josh, when he wrote that, would have been a young adult and very...
under 30.
Under
Like
30,
that, yeah.
very, very convinced that, you know, dating was not something you recorded and did that, you know, very much a representation of what we would now call purity culture. And now, several years later, he has really come back and said, look, at a lot of that stuff that I wrote, he, in fact, on his website, he apologized for writing it.
He's denounced the book and ordered the publishers not to make it anymore.
And as most recently, they're not printing it anymore.
Yeah.
And the thing that with that one that really bothers me, and I think goes to the core of purity culture, is that as a result of his experience with purity culture, not only did he end up divorced,
Right.
you know, which has got to be an absolute blow when you feel like this is the absolute way to go.
Right. Yeah.
And then to end up finding out that your marriage is not going the way you hoped it would go.
Right.
And you know, you didn't get what you were promised. And
Right.
so it put him into a faith crisis.
Right.
Where at this point in time, he's, you know, said, I no longer consider myself or would describe myself as a Christian.
Right.
And I think that is I mean, it's one person. I realize we're responsible for all our own decisions, but to me, that just like inside, that just destroys me.
Right.
Not because it's Josh Harris, but because there was so much shame around not, you know, I was going to be this and I was going to be that. And there's so much shame around not accomplishing that. You know, purity culture promised so much. And, you know, if I just do this, and, you know, it's not just sexually, it's you know, also in terms of relationship. Hey, if you wait till you're married, you'll have a great marriage. Well, that's not all about sex, maybe an initial part of marriage, but not always, right? And so there's other parts of the relationship just never develop. And he's just going to, I think it's just going to happen because I did the right things.
Right.
There's so much in the disappointment of that, that's what really pains me, because he was disappointed, and I can't speak to his whole story. I'm you know, I'm kind of presuming a few things.
Yeah.
But that he was so disappointed with the outcome that he concluded that Jesus wasn't the answer. I think, unfortunately, the church misrepresented Jesus again and promised some things that he didn't promise. And as a result, the disappointment. So I think one of the things that we've got to address today, you know, let's not just talk about purity culture in the past.
Yeah.
But I think what we have to do is we have to address as a church and say, we said some things, and we will always say some things that will turn out to be misguided.
Right.
Because as a church, we're a you know, human organization,
Right.
trying to portray kingdom principles.
Okay.
But you know, things that didn't turn out, you know, we promise some things sometimes that don't work out. We're still just saying the best we can. You know, when I guided my kids in a direction, I did that because I thought that was the best way for them. It didn't always work out.
So is there things then, you know, so you're saying you've been, you raise your kids, obviously, in purity culture, you know, and I haven't touched on, you know, like there's lots of things that have been brought out as negative repercussions about purity culture, right? And, you know, in some ways, maybe it made marriage all about sex instead of about the relationship. You know, there's one blog writer, her name's Natalie Collins. She writes 7 lies purity culture teaches women. 1, that women are responsible for men's sexual sin. Right. That women's bodies are something to be ashamed of. That women shouldn't have sexual desire. That your virginity is the only thing of worth about you.
Yeah.
That women don't enjoy sex as much as men. If women have sex before marriage, everything will go wrong. And because of the prevalence of saving yourself from marriage, that it also teaches women that there's no difference between sexual abuse or sex before marriage because you've been tainted nonetheless.
Those are tragic. I mean, honestly, I'm just inside. I'm just churning.
Yeah.
That people would have been made to feel that way, or that's the net result of something that should be beautiful. You know, should be this great experience shared between two people, an exclusive relationship, and yet here, because of shame, because of guilt, because of misinformation, because people end up feeling used, abused, dirty. You know, I mean, you use the word dirty, and I think that's exactly it. that just wrecks me inside, because that shouldn't be. You know, and I say I just feel awful about it. The reality is, at this point, you know, what do we do?
Yeah.
You know, how do we help people? And some of the, you know, some of the things that you're describing aren't new.
Yep.
You know, the idea that sex was dirty, you know, I think was something that I not necessarily would have been. It's not something I was taught, but something that I would have caught. You catch stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, enough so that when I, you know, at the stage when I was a young adult, there was a book called The Act of Marriage, which was, you know, basically a sex guide.
Use the King James version of the Bible, I'm sure. Or
yeah, while you're having sex. And, you know, it was basically a Christian guide to having sex.
Right, that sounds horrible. Like,
Wait, you're right, it's horrible. And what's even worse is the fact there had to be one. You know, that it was felt that there had to be one, because it had put, you know, it segregated this whole experience, that it's part of a normal relationship. And, you know, it's just a hard topic, you know, because people don't want to talk about it. And then, so when you don't talk about something, talking about it becomes forbidden.
Right.
It's like I noticed, so we did our series a couple months ago on taboo topics.
Yep.
And, you know, when I go back through the views, I see that the one topic that had more hits, almost by double, than any other one, was talking about pornography.
Yeah.
Because sex is such a big thing in our life, and most of us have no idea how to handle it, no idea what to do with it. And so purity culture added, you know, with it, like you say, the intention was to protect it, but in reality, it provided another little distortion.
Well, did it not just build a law around something?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think it certainly did build, you know, another law. And the law never produces righteousness. It never produces good behavior. It just, when you fail,
it produces shame.
It produces shame. And, you know, when I think going back to purity culture and a lot of things is what ends up happening is shame becomes the driver.
Right.
So to me, when I think about purity culture and saying, okay, some things went wrong on this whole topic, you know, God still intends for marriage to provide a sanctity for experience. You know, still intended. But what went wrong is God never intended for us to live out of shame.
Yeah.
So you would have, you know, because of purity culture, you would have a Christian couple who maybe had sex before marriage, and yet, so their whole marriage then, because of what they feel, has this shame attached to it.
Yeah, it's tainted.
Well, it's tainted. It's not. I mean, it's tainted because it's an external thing. But the reality is I think it comes to do with the fact that we have to understand forgiveness, and we don't. I don't think humanity, and even though we talk about forgiveness in church all the time and being forgiven, we mostly talk about forgiving others.
Yeah.
We don't talk much about how we assimilate forgiveness into our life.
Okay.
Because that's the only solution for shame.
Right.
No matter where it comes from.
Right.
Right. Because you know, let's be honest, purity culture isn't the only place where shame comes into a person's world.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And within the church, not even just, you know, I mean, you know.
Anywhere.
You know, we're talking about cancel culture. I mean, there's a breeding ground for some shame too. I said, oh no, I lost my best friend. You know,
lost my job.
Lost my
future.
Ashamed, you know, or you know, I did something wrong. Now I've been canceled. You know, I'm crying, I'm weeping. You know, but you can't. There's no forgiveness.
Right.
And so Jesus tells this really, really important story about forgiveness. It's all about forgiveness. You know, he talks about this guy who owes a big debt. And if you've been in church, you'll have heard this story. If you haven't, let me just summarize it. It's this guy owes his boss a lot of money. And the dollar figure in Jesus' story is not that there's no way, even with the housing market the way it is, that you're going to make enough money to pay for this in your lifetime. Like, it's an unrealistic debt. And he comes to his, you know, loan officer's boss and says, hey, just give me a little bit more time. The request itself is ludicrous because you can never do enough to make up for your past. Like, there's nothing you can ever do.
Right.
Because your past is your past. And so, but we do that, right? Like, we do that.
Right.
So we're always trying to make up for something we did in the past. That's why shame is so insidious, because we're trying to do something to make up for.
Yeah.
And when we can't make up for it, we try to walk away from that. So anyway.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get more time so he can make up for it. And the master, the boss, realizes that it's an impossible request.
Right. It's ludicrous.
So, and so he says, no, look, I'll just forgive you. We'll just cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's a good way to use cancel culture.
Yes.
Let's cancel your debt.
Yeah.
Cancel, those things you did against me, I cancel. And so the man's like, wow, walks out of there. But he immediately, and that's the Bible verse says, it's told a couple of times, but he says he immediately goes out and finds somebody else who owes him some money.
Right.
And starts, give me more money. And the guy responds the same way.
Yeah.
But what he owes him is just a, pittance.
Yeah.
Something he could pay back in given time. And he says the same thing, but he's give me a little more time. Give me a little more time. And the guy says, no, I refuse to give you more time.
Yeah.
And he throws him in jail. I don't know how jail's gonna ever pay anything back, but the story there. And the master hears about it again, and he throws him in jail. And it's a whole terrible story. But the part that's never made sense to me, like it just doesn't, it's hard for me to grasp, is why, when he wasn't owed any money, did he need to collect any money?
Right.
Right? Like he didn't, he had a job, he had an employment, he had everything. There was no further need for him to get that money back.
Right.
And the only explanation for me that's ever made any sense is he just didn't understand what had happened. Like he just never... Master said, look, you don't owe anything anymore. He went out still thinking he had to pay it back.
Right.
He asked for more time, and he assumed he had more time.
Yeah.
So immediately he went out to try to collect the debts and do whatever he could.
Like it was too unbelievable to be true.
Too unbelievable. So the reason we carry around this shame is I don't think we've learned how to assimilate our own forgiveness.
Because same thing, it's too unbelievable to be true that of all our wrongs, of all our sin, of all the things that we've done wrong, all the things that we should be guilty of,
right? That
it's too unreal to believe that someone's forgiven us. So because we're not guilty, we shame ourselves.
Well, we do shame ourselves, in a sense, but we carry, I guess not even to say it that way, but we carry the reaction to guilt through our life.
Right.
Right. So we feel guilty, even though, because we don't understand. And I'm not saying understand, we don't assimilate the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Right. It's why, I'll be 59 this year. At 59, I still think about some things that I did when I was a kid.
Right.
Remember, I even now think about it, I feel guilty about it.
Right.
Because I've never fully integrated forgiveness into my life. Am I forgiven? Absolutely. Have I fully integrated that into my life? No.
Right.
So, purity culture isn't this, is the same kind of thing. There's some things we feel guilty about because of, we might blame other people. The church made me feel guilty. Yeah. And that might be true to a certain extent, but the reality is the church can't release you from that.
Right.
Jesus is the only one that can do that. And he has done everything, but now it's up to us to assimilate that. I think in some ways, Paul writes a statement I think it's in Romans, I'm not sure exactly, but he says, work out your salvation. Yeah. And in some ways, that's a difficult concept or kind of a difficult statement. It's like, okay, I'm saved, been forgiven, now I have to work it out. Yeah. Well, what does that mean? Now I have to make up? If we hear that like the original debtor, it's like I have to do something to get it. But I think what he's really talking about is he says always work on assimilating your forgiveness. Maybe wouldn't use that terminology, but I think that's the key to it is assimilating and owning my forgiveness. Right. Because owning my forgiveness is the only way to live a life that's not shame-based. Right. No matter where it comes from. Yeah. Shame. Purity culture has highlighted the shame in the areas of sexuality. Mm-hmm. I think current culture can. I think 10 years from now we could be talking about the shame from not recycling.
Right.
And I'm not trying to trivialize that.
No, we can talk about that now, actually.
Well, yeah, because in reality, and I've seen a number of studies, a number of surveys, is that most young adults today have stronger convictions about recycling than they do about sexuality.
Yep, definitely.
Right, and so I think 10 years from now we could be talking about the shame I felt by the church because I didn't recycle. Or the shame, the shame I felt for not getting vaccinated, or the shame I felt for getting vaccinated, or the shame, right? Because at the end of the day, what the culture is doing is it's just giving an opportunity for me to feel shamed.
Right.
And the only way out of that is like I'm saying, is assimilating your own forgiveness.
Right.
And,
So then looking, so taking that, great thoughts on forgiveness and assimilating that into our lives. So going into the purity culture. So what, I think a question that exists now. So, I'm a generation that's come out of the purity culture. Totally. I can look back at it and think, was that effective? Was it good? Was it bad? Well, I have different opinions of that, of course.
Sure.
But now I've got children. And here comes the question of now, what do I do with an experience that was, semi-positive, let's call it, to my children now? Because my immediate reaction is to do the same things, or do nothing, do exactly the opposite or do exactly the same. And I think one thing about purity culture that I found growing up is I guess I don't know that it became its own personal conviction.
Right.
But it was the right thing. Right. So purity culture felt like the right thing. So would we say, and here's probably a foundational question, is some objections to purity culture would be saying that it's antiquated or outdated to believe that someone should save themselves or abstain from sex or sexual activity until marriage. Right. Is that true? Is that a fault of purity culture that purity culture taught that you should abstain until marriage?
I don't think so. I think I'm really cautious. Honestly, I'm really cautious about how I present this because sexuality is this huge thing, and multiple sexual partners. Obviously, I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. I mean, I didn't. I shouldn't say obviously, but I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. That wasn't part of how I was raised or anything else. But yet, it's a real thing for most people.
Yep.
Do I, my fallback would be, well, there's benefits to not having multiple partners. Mm-hmm. I'd actually probably say it a little differently now.
Sure.
Without the emphasis on the sexual side of it. I actually think when I look at people who have multiple divorces,
right,
I see damage to their persons themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe one of the biggest mistakes purity culture maybe made was making sexuality the only thing about a relationship, when really what we should have been talking about was like all these really, really deep relationships that break off affect you.
Right.
They affect you. You have, you lose something. I mean, I know as a pastor, I've lost friends over the years, and I lose that. It's not the same. I can't imagine the pain going through a breakup in a marriage. Like it would just be devastating, and it would affect you, and it would change you. Do I think keeping sex within marriage and maintaining that purity as a means to preserving a relationship? I would say absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I would want to, I guess, I'm going to come back to your comment about as a parent. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that as parents we don't always get right is we tend to teach our kids out of our experience. Mm-hmm. What we should, I think the better way is to teach our kids out of a principle. So your kids will become not who you, or not what you do, but actually more of what you think.
Okay.
So how you think and how your principles will get passed on to your kids. That's why, so often kids, they're not acting like their parents, but they think the same. Their principles are the same. Because that's what we pass on. And so if I think we have to concentrate more on passing on a principle rather than an action. So even in terms of like what I would say to parents raising kids and saying what I think is important, let me just say, is I think what really becomes important is passing on the principle of security and relationship, because most of us are insecure. Most of us are, you know, and we go from relationship, and people that go from relationship to relationship are really, I think in a lot of ways, trying to find a place of security. We say, you know, I just want a casual relationship, or I just want that. But what we're all designed to have is security, because that's a place of safety.
Right.
And God's intention is that's in marriage, that's an ultimate place of security, because a place of security in marriage then gives a place of security for kids to grow up in, which gives you a different sense of security. You know, purity culture's mistake was it made it all about sex, like you said. But if we could help our kids understand that what we're trying to do here is not keep you pure till marriage.
Yeah.
We're not, you know, that will be a byproduct if we understand that we want to be the kind of person that can go into a relationship and make a full-on commitment and be committed to somebody. One of the, you know, things that we're, you know, coming up to 40 years of marriage and being married, both of us were 19. One of the things that I would say about ourselves is that we actually were not compatible.
Right.
But we didn't know.
Are you compatible now?
No, even less so.
Well, at least you know now.
Yeah, even less so. So we didn't go into marriage with the expectation of compatibility.
Right.
We went into marriage with the expectation of commitment. So when we weren't compatible, that wasn't an issue,
right?
Because we had already made a commitment.
Right.
And the great thing about, for us, making the commitment meant we got to learn about all the other stuff together. And so I think just helping people understand, not, you know, I mean, when you're 30, it's a different deal. If you're getting married when you're 30, it's a different deal.
I'm 31.
Yeah, I know you're 31,
Okay.
but, you know, and you've been married for a while.
Yeah.
But a few years. But, you know, you get married at 30 or 35, you're not going to look for the same thing. You want to make a commitment, but you want to connect with somebody that you're more compatible, because you don't have the same 20 years to grow into something. You need to accept what you've got. But, you know, what you're looking for is you're looking for a place of safety. You're looking for a place of security. You're looking for a place where ultimately I can be who I really am and be loved for that. And so I think the issue with purity culture has ultimately, at this point, is that it made sex into something it wasn't intended to be. Sex isn't intended to be the creator of security. It's a fruit of security.
I'm just giving you space to talk. I've nothing to say, of course. So, okay, really good. I have two other questions that I sort of want to get to.
Sure.
And one is touching on gender stereotypes. So that would be another question on purity culture, is that gender stereotypes were propagated by the purity culture. So what do we say now?
So when you say gender stereotypes, you're meaning, you know, this is a traditional blue job, pink job.
No, I would say even something as clear as you know, you would have today, you would have the propagation that women are to adorn themselves very modestly, so that men aren't tempted by how they look, like those sort of things. These stereotypes that women are subservient to men, right. And you know, not just you know, sexually, I guess is really what that is. That men are uncontrollable beasts. That
pigs. Yeah,
essentially. So women have to protect themselves from men.
Yeah. I wish that wasn't as true as I think it is. I mean, you know, unfortunately, I'm not. Well, not unfortunately. Fortunately, I'm not really in a position that I can speak to that directly, because I don't have any experience in that. But
right.
You know, I think by the response to our topic of pornography and, you know, all that kind of stuff, it's, you know, it's obviously a huge issue. Victimization, all of that. You know, I think it's tragic. I think it's. I mean, personally, I think it's tragic, and I don't think it's what God intended. A woman is not intended to be a sexual object. You know, she shouldn't have to feel like, I can't go in public dressed like this because a guy, you know, I'm going to, you know, I mean, we have a whole other religions devoted to that.
Right.
You know? And I think it's a basic misunderstanding, and I mean, it's in the Bible too. It's the same one. You know, when we talked about cancer culture, it's when the woman caught in the act of adultery is brought to Jesus. She's by herself. There's a guy involved if you're caught in the act.
Yeah.
and he wasn't there, or maybe he was. Maybe
Yeah.
he was standing with the accusers. I don't know. It's a historical thing. But here's where I go back to, because I can hear somebody saying, well, the Bible teaches those stereotypes. Here's what I go back to. I go back to the Garden of Eden. Husband and wife, Adam and Eve, both naked, both unashamed. There's nobody's responsible for somebody else. Everybody's responsible for themselves, and in that environment, they're just unashamed. It's not. There's no stereotyping going on there. Right from the start, there's no stereotyping. The Bible describes actual events and stuff that happened too. Yeah, there was some, stereotyping through history, and the Bible isn't silent on it. But let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to what God intended. It's not there. Different roles, not different value. But men and women play different roles. A certain amount of difference. Not all, it's not always as pronounced as people think. But a certain amount of difference. We need to live into our own gifts and our abilities the best way we can.
And then with we're in 21st century purity culture. What does I guess my concern with anything that we look at, like purity culture, I think I can see a lot of negatives behind it.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm sure there's positives that you can see behind it too. And my concern always would be that we would take one thing and throw it all out and miss, and then 20 years from now be sitting having the conversation about, oh, here's that thing we threw out, and here's the other way that we went on it.
Yeah.
So what do we take from purity culture that we do hold on to and move forward with?
Yeah, I think that we need to hold on to the fact that relationships are important. That relation is the core. The whole Bible is a book on relationship.
Right.
Men and women having a relationship with each other, the restoration of our relationship with God. That's New Testament, even the church is described in a family relationship. That's ultimately what it's all about, relationship. So I think in so much as we can see what purity culture was trying to do, saying, hey, let's have a great relationship. It just put the emphasis on the wrong thing. When you put the emphasis on a result instead of on the process, you end up with the wrong thing.
Right.
So they put the emphasis on
abstinence,
rather than great relationship. And so I think we just need to come back. We need to hang on to that with everything we're worth. And everything. I mean, we talked about cancel culture. It's going to come back to relationship.
Yeah.
You talk about purity. It's going to come back to relationship. And,
Yeah.
and for me, it's going to come. There's going to be not a spoiler for everything we talk about, but for me, most things come back to two things. They come back to grace, and they come back to relationship.
Right.
And so coming out of the purity culture, understanding grace and taking that grace for myself. If you were damaged, if you feel like you were damaged as a result of purity culture, and maybe that's caused you to walk away from your faith, or you're questioning your faith specifically because of that. I really encourage you to actually dig deeper into that grace of God. That it's not about walking away from the externals. It's about receiving what God has for you in terms of that forgiveness. And there's going to be a question in mind right now. Well, why should I have to have forgiveness for something that I did that wasn't wrong? Like if you're on the other side of it and say, hey, I was taught I was supposed to abstain until marriage, but now I don't think that's wrong, so why should I feel guilty about it? You shouldn't. You shouldn't. But not because it's no longer wrong, but because anything we do that leaves us in that spot of saying, hey, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done wrong, there's a forgiveness for it. There's a grace for it. And if we assimilate that grace into our life, that forgiveness in our life, we stop operating out of shame. We operate out of shame. We just do. We're always trying to prove something. We're always trying to prove we're bigger than that thing we're shame. And I see that happening with people with purity culture, with so many things.
Amazing. Well, thank you for answering some questions and digging into purity culture and the church. Next week, we're going to be talking about social justice in the church.
Awesome.
And digging into that. And we'll be live next week.
Yeah.
So people can submit questions. And we will address them, or Pastor Dave will interject in our following week to address them as he sees fit, nonetheless. But hey, if this has been helpful,
I just think questions are so important.
That's good. You are showing the value of it. You just disvalued my value of control. That's all. Anyways, well, thank you for joining us. And as Pastor Dave said last week, if you think this is going to be helpful to someone, share it, find it online. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, help people find the information, stay in tune with what's going on in the life of the church. But next week we're talking social justice and the church.
Sounds like fun.
We'll see you then.